How is Notre Dame de Paris rebuilt? The Notre Dame Cathedral, which has been under construction for over 4 years, has finally made significant progress. According to the original plan, it is expected to be completed by the end of 2024. However, due to the desire to open it before the Paris Olympics next year, the French people's temperament has greatly changed. Recently, they have started to rush to work, even working overtime at night, and the entire construction site is brightly lit. On April 15, 2019, a sudden fire broke out in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, causing over 2/3 of the tower tops to be burned down, and the iconic spire to collapse, causing shock and heartache to the world. Afterwards, Notre Dame de Paris entered a closed state, surrounded by huge scaffolding. The first step after a fire is to clear the ruins and assess the damage, including internal tables, chairs, sculptures, paintings, etc., and after the lead roof was melted down by the scorching fire, a large amount of dust and toxic residues were left on the floor and walls. This step alone took a whole year. The second step is to repair and reinforce. A large number of support frames were built both internally and externally to protect the towers, arches, and walls from secondary collapse, which took nearly a year. After completing these 2 pre-treatment steps, we finally arrived at the repair, and the most crucial ones were the roof and spire. How to repair them became a problem again. At that time, there were also institutions that launched a global solicitation campaign, and architects and designers had brainstormed and designed over 200 solutions. After repeated discussions, France ultimately decided to remain loyal to the original architecture, not to do new construction, but to use original materials and techniques to restore its original appearance. Researchers and architectural archaeologists have decided to make a CT of the cathedral. Find a drone equipped with a camera and a rotary scanner, scan every part of the church, digitize the roof and its structural details one by one, and ultimately generate a 4-dimensional model accurate to centimeters. Then came the expert in digital building modeling. By calculating the position of each stone on the ground and its vertical drop, the original position of each stone on the arch can be calculated as much as possible, and then different arrangement combinations can be simulated through modeling. When we try to place a stone in a certain place, other problems and difficulties will arise, or we suddenly realize that a stone should actually be placed here, and all other stones' positions will be disrupted. Some stones are severely damaged, and it is necessary to find suitable stones. Researchers sampled existing stones and searched for ancient buildings and quarries around the world before finding stones with similar colors, properties, and composition from over 6,000 samples. Finally, special cutting and polishing are required to present an ancient texture that can blend harmoniously with the original stone and be restored as old. At Ateliers Perrault, a 250-year-old carpentry company in France's Loire Valley, one of the 2 chosen to restore the roof, you don't hear the whirring of electric saws. It's the chopping of axes that resounds as craftsmen transform oak trees into long, rectangular beams by hand. Carpenter Joseph Canuel explains, "We made cathedral roofs well before saws and sawmills existed, and this is how it worked," he says. "You got the wood in the nearby forest like we're doing. And sure, we could easily cut these logs into 2 boards, but keeping the wood fibers the whole length of the beam gives it more resistance. We've never done something like this before," he says. The roof frame is dating from medieval times, the 12th century, and there's just such a huge volume of wood. Bonheur says some 1,400 oak trees are needed for the charpente of the nave, the aisle that leads to the altar, and choir, the part of the cathedral that provides seating for the clergy and choir. Taken from the round tree to a square timber all by hand, all with axes, he says, describing what's known as boxed heart timber, where logs aren't split down the middle but the edges are cut, leaving the center. They could have used faster, modern techniques relying on electric saws, drills, clamps, screws and nails. But he says there is a love of the traditional way of doing things in France, and Notre Dame's 21st century rebuilders wanted to preserve that. Working inside the massive wooden structure was extremely impressive, he says. You're in the sky but completely in the dark, so you discovered the forest with flashlight and headlamps, never entirely seeing the whole thing. But you could hear and feel everything going on in the cathedral below, the priests celebrating Mass, the smell of incense. And we were near the belfry, so all of a sudden the bells would ring, and resound very strongly. It was as if the cathedral was alive under your feet. A cathedral is a structural ensemble that's very complex, and as soon as you change one little thing, one parameter, it impacts everywhere else in the cathedral, he says. So reconstructing it exactly the same way is also a precaution. It worked very well for 800 years. So we know if we build it back the same way we won't risk damaging the cathedral by trying something new. Edouard Cortés, another carpenter, removes parchment-thin layers of wood with his axe, which he says was hand-forged out of iron and steel in the traditional way to resemble what Notre Dame's original carpenters would have used 9 centuries ago. Martin Claudel is the expert who made 60 of these axes at the forge, each stamped with an image of the cathedral. Longer-handled axes are for chopping big pieces of wood and taking off the bark, Claudel explains, while others help carpenters hone the wood with precision and give it a smoother, beautiful surface. These axes leave a magnificent mark on these beams, Cortés says. The same medieval mark found on the beams from Notre Dame. For me it is a passion to work with such old tools. You work with your hand, your hatchet, your heart and your head. A crane lifts one of the giant triangular frames and aligns it next to the others, a dry run before the final installation atop Notre Dame in the coming months. Then, the removable metal pins connecting the trusses will be replaced by permanent wooden mortise and tenon joints. There won't be a single nail, screw or piece of metal in Notre Dame's new medieval roof frame. Retired General Jean-Louis Georgelin is in charge of the entire project of rebuilding Notre Dame. He says it's important to be faithful to the cathedral's medieval artisans. That spirit is imbuing all the restoration work. The internal repair work is also being carried out in an orderly manner. The famous pipe organ, although not burned down, was filled with a lot of ash in the channel. More than 8,000 metal pipes were removed one by one, cleaned and maintained, and then reassembled. All stained glass windows have been cleaned, and a stained glass database of Notre Dame in Paris has been established. The most famous rose window, fortunately not damaged, regained its brilliance. 8 dusty copper clocks have also been repaired, and acoustic researchers are studying and tuning their tones. In the near future, the bell will ring again over Paris. Hugo once described Notre Dame de Paris as a history written in stone. It is not only the carrier of French history, scientific history, and artistic history, but also the common history of all humanity, worthy of everyone's protection. Looking forward to the day when Notre Dame de Paris reopens.